I'll be really honest with you, like Denise, studying for this presentation tonight genuinely blew my brain. I was of the school that there was a learning style canon that we as instructional designers had to hold to, and that it really helped us in crafting our content for our learners. So if we go to the next slide, we'll actually get a chance to see these are the four main popular learning styles that in traditional instructional design, we've all been told about, right? There's the visual learner. So those are people who prefer to use images or graphics or colors and infographics to help them learn and pick up the ideas that they're understanding, and that allows them to take in the content visually. And then we hear about auditory learners. So people who need to hear what is being presented, and a lot of pictures just clouds their judgment, and it makes it difficult for them to receive the information that's being presented. And then we hear about reading and writing as a learning style. So people who comprehend and understand learning when they're writing things out. Now, this one seemed very dear to my heart because as someone who typically when I am writing or in a lecture, I don't know if Chuck remembers this, but I would write down everything he said. And I would have notebooks full of whatever Chuck said, even if it was a sneeze, I had it in a notebook somewhere, right? So yeah. I held very true to the belief that reading and writing was my learning style, that was the way that I digested learning and content, and that's what made me smart. And then there are kinesthetic learners who need to be able to touch or build something, right? Because this isn't creepy, right? So we think about kinesthetic learners as people who need to apply their knowledge to actually building something. Typically, you see this learning style with hard skills. So when you have someone who is learning a process where it's something on a development line or a, what is the word I'm looking for? Like a line of processing for a hard
assembly line. I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. And when you think about people who are working on an assembly line, you typically refer to them as kinesthetic learners. But if we go to the next slide, I'm about to show you something that really changed up the game for me, which was basically the reality that within this belief or concept of learning styles, did y'all know that there are actually up to 30 learning styles out there in the world that people are promoting as a concept? That there are up to 30 different ways to learn. And so thank you, Denise. Now here is a look at some of the 30 different styles of learners that there allegedly exist out there in the world today. We have convergers versus divergers, institutionists versus analysts, extroverts versus introverts, judging versus perceivers, left brain versus right brain, assimilators versus explorers, imaginative versus analytic, non-committers versus plungers, common sense versus dynamic learner.
Chuck is really you're blowing Chuck's mind right now, or you're really driving him crazy. His mind is ready to explode.
When I saw this, and I want to be very clear for everyone who is watching this as a recording or those who are with us live, when I tell you I want to say maybe for like the first 5 years of my career as an instructional designer, held true to the belief that learning styles were crucial with my development, and that I had to incorporate knowledge checks and learning activities that aligned with the medium learner, like someone who aligned with the baseline of all of these learning styles.
Impossible.
Go to the next slide. So basically, once I understood that essentially there's no real way to actually test for learning styles. The research confirms that the only real way that you can test to determine if what someone's learning style is through self-reporting. So essentially, what a learner says is their main way of digesting and understanding information. That is the most consistent way that we can get that data. But the reality is, it's not accurate and it's not reliable, right? Because people people are not learning professionals. We go to school for this. So it's our job to develop curriculum and content that aligns and connects with our learners. But if we are solely focused on the idea that I need to create products or content that align with kinesthetic learners, that align with auditory or visual learners, then you're basing that information off of inaccurate data that you're receiving. And we get an audible sigh from the crowd, right? So essentially, a lot of times as instructional designers, we've been fed this myth that there are learning styles that we need to develop our curriculum towards, and that we can accurately assess what someone's learning style is. But the short answer is no, you can't. Because at the end of the day, the only type of diagnostic tool you can get is going to be self-reporting. And if someone is self-reporting, they are not going to accurately assess their skills. And what studies have shown is that a lot of times when someone says, oh, well, I learn best through reading and writing, the reality is that either there is no change in how they learn through other learning styles, or the learning style that they purport to be best aligned with is actually harming their ingestion of, or their digestion of knowledge and content. So the next time you're preparing content for a workshop and a subject matter expert says, well, everybody here is a kinesthetic learner, run. Or just, develop stuff that aligns with all types, not all 30 types of learning styles, but the main types of ways that people learn. So I want to talk about what works and what doesn't work. So essentially, when we think about actually assessing someone's learning ability, we want to lean more towards, traditionally, we want to lean more towards diagnostic tools that assess someone's learning style. But the reality is, the best way to measure someone's learning ability is through cognitive testing. Typical types of cognitive tests are the Myers-Briggs assessment, right? So you would think that someone who is, and I'll be honest, personally, I don't like the Myers-Briggs assessment for several reasons. But if you are intent on using that as a basis for your analysis, focus on more cognitive assessments that you can use as opposed to
I just want to throw in at this point.
Okay.
I am an INFJ.
Okay.
We are 1% of the population. We're the ones that see UFOs and talk to aliens from other worlds.
Cool.
We can read the future, and we never sleep. And the best job for us is to probably, be a prophet, something like that. So I just wanted to let everybody know I'm an INFJ. Very proud of that.
And it definitely tracks from what I've seen.
Especially the alien part.
Right. I would say, Chuck,
Extraterrestrials are cool.
you're definitely out of this world, in my opinion.
Oh, Ashley.
But, you know,
Can I have a moment?
when we think about how we want to actually engage our learners, if you're basing your content development on learning styles, you are basing your development, you're setting it up for failure. I'll just be really honest with you, because as research has shown, it is ineffective and it's unreliable. And what's really interesting is that through the research that I did for this topic, some of the main architects of learning style theory even came out and said in later years that it is an ineffective way to determine how someone will properly digest the content that's being presented. Now, if you think about someone like Chuck, who is an INFJ, right, versus me, who is an ENTP, ABCD, GFXY, right?
AM and FM, yeah.
Right, there you go. But the way that Chuck and I learn would probably be different. I am an extrovert at heart. So being able to
No, come on. No more news flashes, Ashley.
I know, it's breaking news, right? But as someone who is an extrovert, what I really appreciate is a teacher who engages me with activities where I get to talk and think through.
This is turning into a laugh fest over here from Chuck.
It's hard to talk to somebody who's known you for 20 years. And it's
Hello. Right. Exactly. But I mean, so like thinking about it from that perspective, using diagnostic tools in your audience analysis will be more valuable to you than basing your analysis on learning styles. I promise you it will be a waste of your time. And ultimately, you're going to come up with some really surprising data that is not going to be reliable if you base it on learning styles. But engaging your learners using interactive techniques that don't actually classify your learners, but will bring them in through various ways, right? So for example, if we're doing a synchronous webinar, but we don't have the use of telephones, right? But all we have are chats and poll questions and hand raising icons. Those are ways that you can engage your learners that have different types of personalities. So if you have people who are mostly introverts, in my opinion, maybe you would want to do things where all they have to do is click a yes or no to a question and answer. Or if you have people in the class that are really trying to let you know and get your attention. And those are the learners who are the more extroverts, like Ashley coming in live from Atlanta. They come into the classroom and they already introduce themselves on a webinar with 300 people. You're not looking at that person, but they want you to know that they're there. Those are the types of people that are going to do the open-ended knowledge check questions. Right. And those are the ones that you can engage using the chat feature. And if you have some that are in between, or you don't really know how they are going to interact with you, you can use the hand raise icon or other status icons to get their attention. Ultimately, the problem with learning styles is that you end up pigeonholing your learners. And that can be very dangerous because you're creating a set of classification or categorization that assumes how your learner is going to effectively consume the content that's being presented. And I'll go even further to say that I think within that space, there's opportunity to apply certain prejudices or microaggressions to certain learning styles. And so in being very intentional about your audience analysis and not just saying, oh, I assume that this group of people are more auditory versus visual because of a set of stereotypes or prejudices, you're really doing yourself a greater benefit to your learners by going the extra mile of not pigeonholing them or categorizing them based on certain learning styles. Can we go to the next slide? So when we think about what doesn't work, simply put, building your curriculum based on a learning style is ineffective. At this point, it's conclusive, in my opinion, and I haven't used learning styles as an excuse for how I create my curriculum probably in like 7 or 8 years. And I would say the value and the benefit of that is it's allowed me to truly become innovative in the type of curriculum that I'm developing and the ways that I'm engaging my learners. Because I think that there are some auditory or visual cues or the way that we're designing our narration that can really connect with people, that if you're only using a learning style to categorize your learners and present curriculum to only one group of people, you're not really effectively doing your job as an instructional designer. Mm-hmm. And so if we go to the next slide, the conclusions that I came to from my research is that, one, learning styles are not a real thing. And the research on it is actually pretty easy to find in terms of the actual developers of learning styles saying, we realize that this isn't real and it's not effective. And then the other conclusion is that many learning professionals, unfortunately, still promote them, which is why, Chuck, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be on this platform, sharing and demystifying this for all of our learners and all of the instructional design professionals who watch this. If you are a learning professional, please do not believe the hype. Learning styles are not a real thing. What is a real thing are cognitive and behavioral assessments that you can use in your analysis to determine KPIs, characteristics, behavioral indicators. Those are the things that will help you develop curriculum and content that enhances someone's learning experience. Learning styles, literally not at all. And I said this in the last slide, but I want to really drive home this point that when you use learning styles to assess and develop curriculum for your learners, you are pigeonholing them. Whether you believe it or not, you're categorizing them based on pseudoscience, and you're more better off if you develop curriculum based on the astrology signs of your learners than you do learning style assessments. So those are my opinions based on research. And I open the floor up to our experts for their feedback.